All right, we're going to get started now. Everybody let him get started here. This will be great. Again, this is our Geothermal in Colorado panel with Michael Jewell moderating.
And I have a very important question for each and every one of you. You might have to think about it, because it may have been a while. But when was the last time it all came together in your job or your sphere of influence? It's been a while for me, really. There's always something missing, right? Some key component to your investment to make it work. But that's why this panel is so important and even fun putting it together. Because with geothermal, things are coming together. The things are falling into place. Jobs, technology, innovation, and the right dialed-in regulation. And so we have some wonderful people to describe how each of those components fit in with geothermal development in Colorado, and it couldn't be more exciting. Even with an OGDP approved for some geothermal exploration, even about a year ago when the rules came into effect, it's an exciting time to see how this is an industry that will dovetail with existing oil and gas development. So with that, my friends today are Kaleb Roush with SM Energy. Y'all don't know Julie, I don't think, but Julie Murphy, Director of the ECMC. Mathew Mendisco, the Town Manager of the town of Hayden, Colorado. And Wendy Fenner of ZGEO Energy, and she's going to kick us off with a slide presentation, and we'll go from there.
Thank you, Michael. Okay, yeah, so thanks for having me speak today. I'm Wendy Fenner. I grew up in Western Colorado, but because of the economy at the time, I had to move away and spend about 20 years wandering the deserts of Las Vegas as a civil engineer. And then I decided around 2014 to come back to the Western Slope and help my dad figure out what to do with the Good Shepherd Ranch. And so we're going to be talking about that here today. So the Good Shepherd Ranch is a 960-acre site that is located in Montrose County, and we have 200 acres in San Miguel County, and we're just about a mile, I guess, west of where that county line intersects Ouray County. So I call it the Tri-County area of southwest Colorado. So this is where our site's located. And when I moved away and came back, it was really not much had changed in terms of economic prosperity. And I saw this as an opportunity to keep the next generation grounded here on the Western Slope instead of exporting out our most valuable resource, which is our kids. So, next slide. So, basically, what we're trying to do with the coal closure that took place in 2019 out in Nucla, that put our location, which is the west end of Montrose County, that designation as a coal closure community. And so we really see this as an opportunity to take a lot of those skill sets out of both oil and gas and fossil industry and transfer them into geothermal. There's just been a lot of excitement around geothermal in the last 2 to 3 years, and I think a lot of that is because of all the technology that was developed in oil and gas, and it's finally being implemented in geothermal. And as you all probably know, geothermal's been around for 120 years. The first geothermal plant was built in Italy in 1904. It's still in operation. It produces 800 megawatts today. So it's a very steady resource that's always available. And so what is the benefit of building a geothermal plant in Colorado? Well, there's multiple benefits. Number one, being at our elevation, we're about 9,000 feet at the Good Shepherd Ranch. So we're definitely higher than sea level, where you need 212 degrees Fahrenheit to actually create steam. At 9,000 feet, you only need 195 degrees Fahrenheit. So we're unique in that regard. Also, the air pressure is lighter. So if you've ever driven up to the mountains with your bag of chips and watched it expand, that's because the air is lighter up here. And so there's some benefits to getting those turbines to spin more efficiently. Also, because of our high elevation, we definitely have cooler temperatures in the atmosphere. So that big delta T I call it, between the atmosphere and what's going on below ground. That actually helps you produce more power. In fact, you can produce 10% more energy in the wintertime compared to summer months. With that, those are just some of the key things that I think about when I think about geothermal in Colorado and that high elevation advantage. This is an example of a plant that's kind of at the similar elevation, maybe a little bit lower. This is in Utah, near Cove Fort. It's right where I-70 dead ends into I-15. And if you didn't know this plant was there, you wouldn't know it driving by because it's kind of tucked away off the frontage road. But this area here is about 10 acres where you see most of the plant equipment and everything. There are some pipelines that kind of run off into the distance to grab more heat from other wells. But I did this as a comparison because this site generates on 10 acres surface footprint 27 megawatts. If I wanted to do 27 megawatts of solar, I'd probably need about 250 acres. And then we've been working very diligently since I moved back to Colorado in 2014 with the various stakeholders in our region. So I've worked closely with both San Miguel County, Montrose County. I live in Ouray County, so I know everybody. It's not hard to do. There's not a lot of people. So, they all know what I've been up to and what I've been trying to do. And the interesting thing about it is it doesn't matter which side of the political aisle they're on. They support geothermal. They get it. And then this is kind of a vision of what our master plan for Good Shepherd Ranch will be. So the foundation or cornerstone of the project is the geothermal electricity generation. We're hoping to generate a minimum of 20 megawatts. We'd like to get up to 80. And we're also looking at how we can take the waste heat as it comes out of the plant and starts to cool down before we recirculate it back into the reservoir, how we can use that heat for other uses, such as greenhouses, heating greenhouses, maybe residential components that we could put in there. We've been approached by data center developers and especially the smaller edge data centers that are very interested in being able to offtake our power directly on our site. So we have an opportunity with both data center developers that want to be behind the meter versus being able to connect to the grid. We have a WAPA transmission line right next to our property, so we can kind of accommodate both. But we do want to build what I call like a microgrid community up there where we can not only provide our own power for our site and our development, but also supply power to the local and the transmission grid. So.
Fantastic. As Wendy kept saying, the west slope, the best slope. And so that brings me to Mathew. Speaking a lot about siting and the local regulations involved there, what can you tell us about your experience?
Well, first of all, thank you for having me. And I'm in Roush County. You saw the slide from the budget folks. We don't have a ton of natural gas and oil and gas development in Roush County, but our neighbors do. In Moffett County, they have more. But I think siting, when it comes to siting, first and foremost, Hayden's kind of been in the throes of geothermal because we're, from a heating and cooling standpoint, we are doing that right now. We have 50 plus wells in the ground already. We're drilling a closed looped system. And I think, so from a siting standpoint, we are like our own guinea pigs when it comes to that because we're doing it right now. We started drilling before actually those regulations came in place, and we had to just be good stewards of what we were doing, taking national standards, engineering standards, et cetera. And lucky for us, we were already in compliance by the time they came out. So, but I think from a siting standpoint, what local governments now, there's county government regulation and municipality regulation, and while they can be the same, I think they will often be different. But speaking from a municipality standpoint, I think the interesting and the most exciting thing about geothermal, both from an electric generation standpoint, and the potential there, as well as heating and cooling, is that this is not a messy system. And when I say messy, this isn't like lines going down right-of-ways. This isn't, when we had a big event last year. And when you show up for the siting and you look at some of the other wells we drilled, they're like, well, where are they? And I'm like, they're right here. But you can't see them because they're all underground. There's no messy on top of the thing. There's no, release of dealing with, it's heated water and for heating and cooling. And really, at the end of the day, you're doing the same thing, steam. You're just sending water down there at a higher temperature to generate the steam to come back for electric generation. So I like to say, with geothermal as well, she says, forever resource. Our town council, when they asked me, well, how sustainable is this? And this might be a joke, it might not be. I said, well, as long as the earth keeps spinning, we're going to be fine, because that's what generates geothermal. Like, that's it, right? That's what we got. And so
we'll have bigger problems.
From that standpoint, it's a closed loop system as well. So the siting of it, once the injection water comes in, it's like maybe a gallon a year of loss. And so I think from a siting standpoint, it's almost so creative to do it this way, because you don't see anything. You don't have, if we have an incident of like a leaky pipe or whatever, nothing's being shut down. It's just treated water. And I think there's opportunity from an oil and gas standpoint of those things were in place, or just to participate with you all in partnerships to try to take this, you guys have some of the best drilling crews out there. So I think it's just extremely important that we partner together. Hayden's system will be coming online, and we do, hopefully, depending on how things go here legislatively, we're hoping to continue to expand, not because it's a oil and gas thing, it's just, how can we complement places, how can we complement things for the betterment of all of our communities, and hopefully, help everybody's customer base go from there. And I think the siting aspect, from a local government standpoint, the state has come up with some really good rules and regulations. And to be quite honest, just ensuring that they're meeting the state regulations, I would encourage all municipalities, whatever else, these are great. Just, if you have to, just make sure that the siting is done or whatever. Make sure it's in compliance with your existing right-of-way rules or whatever the case may be. I think that's probably enough. We have enough regulation in the world, as you guys know. So I think it's probably, and I think the state did, and I'll pass it to Julie, did an amazing job in being practical. How do we deliver this service, and how do we do it efficiently without being just really burdensome on an industry that is growing? And we want to continue to grow it, push it, make it happen further. So that would be my, intake. So
speaking of when it all comes together, that you found yourself in compliance when the new rules came in, that's a good feeling.
Yeah, we strove very, very hard to ensure, there was some old rules out there, federal regulation, there's Heat Pump Association, so we were in federal regulations that were really old, but just trying to make sure, and we had conversations with the Department of Water Resources, et cetera, who regulates geothermal, by the way. So anyway.
So tell us about how your perspective rolls into what Mathew just said.
Terrific. Thank you all. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you, Kirby. Thank you, Garfield County. I think it's fair to say that not just Colorado, but I would argue the entire Intermountain West, whether red state or blue state, is bullish on geothermal. It has been a driving force. As you noted, Michael, everything has come together from a technology standpoint, from an engineering standpoint, and from an understanding of the resource and thinking about how you could move from kind of traditional hydrothermal into these different versions of geothermal. I think that, Wendy, you did a great job of overviewing the opportunity for electrical generation from geothermal. This is what we tend to call deep geothermal, EGS, AGS. There's all these terms, but I think what I want you to walk away from here is to know that there's probably a geothermal application for almost any energy demand, from residential all the way up to connecting to the grid. I think, Mathew, you've done a great job talking about some of the more direct use or thermal energy networks and what that looks like and how that intersects. And then, like I said, from my perspective, there's kind of a technology for any use. We're talking about home heating, we're talking about thermal energy networks, we're talking about greenhouses and direct use, all the way to then power generation and how we put those things together. But with such a distributed opportunity, you also need an appropriate regulatory environment. So us at the Energy and Carbon Management Commission, we're really focused on the deep geothermal. We're working really closely with our partners at the Division of Water Resources for the shallower geothermal to make sure that those resources are also being managed. They're different risk profiles, they need different regulatory regimes. And then as you get shallower, more into the home space, that is an even different conversation, but again, we're tailoring. And I think the other piece to really be thinking about, I think that drought is on every Westerner's mind right now, especially folks out here, especially as we're watching the negotiations on the Colorado River. And geothermal has a role to play and also needs to be very attentive to what water use means or doesn't mean. I know that our West Slope oil and gas operators are above par when it comes to managing produced water. That is something we can continue to lead on in Colorado, I think, when it comes to these different geothermal technologies as well, to articulate the either minimal water use or to account for that. And that is really a key conversation that I think is going to need to continue to be developed. It is core to us as Westerners to manage water, right? There's the wonderful quote about, whiskey's for drinking, water's for fighting. And so we need to keep that central to the work and also understand the breadth and depth of applications. We put together a really high-level handout about the geothermal opportunity across the U.S., and also kind of a thermometer that shows the different uses. That, of course, is sitting in my car right now, but I promise I'll go get it and make it available to anybody who wants to have a visual representation of what these opportunities are. And please don't hesitate to reach out to us to be resources to help you understand this technology.
And Julie, real quickly, an observation I had after the geothermal rulemaking was it seemed like it was a moderate rulemaking, but then the investment or the interest came after. What are you seeing?
I think it's a terrific question, right? We've seen huge announcements in geothermal companies and huge announcements kind of throughout the Intermountain West. And I think Colorado is poised to be next for technology, for geology, and for financial, and for then creating regulatory certainty. So I hope that this technology is going to be part of our communities. I hope as community leaders, you all are thinking about what it looks like for your community, whether it's from a siting standpoint or from being a consumer, and how it can be a part of your future. And again, I think there's tons of folks here to answer questions about that. So I'm optimistic. I'm always bullish. Well, I'm always optimistic, and I'm bullish on this one.
But Kaleb, this is the exciting part for me as someone who practices a good bit in oil and gas law. Wendy and Mathew and Julie all mentioned the existing expertise and innovation. And with SM Energy, how do you see these opportunities, and what is SM doing?
Yeah, no, thanks for the question, and thanks for having me, everyone. We're in an early stage of trying to figure out how to deploy geothermal tactfully and to kind of add it to our toolkit, if you will. So, we're evaluating things like closed loop systems like Mathew had been talking about, some open loop systems as well. Other things that have been really popular talking about lately as well as going in and using some legacy wells, trying to repurpose those for geothermal uses as well. We tend to be leaning more into, at least right now, new development on that end, just because legacy wells come with their own baggage, if you will. I was actually having a conversation with someone at the rest stop in Vail yesterday from Longmont about that. So, being good stewards and not wanting to leave a mess either. We're really excited at the idea of getting some stuff behind the meter at first. There's a lot of regulatory stuff that has to happen, and that's probably not one of our core competencies right out of the gate. So we want to make sure that we're being responsible with our people and our time too, and making sure we're kind of stepping up our game slowly but surely. So we're looking at closed loop systems in certain places where there's a little less porosity in the ground, and some open loop systems where there's more, and hopefully we can get an application into the ECMC here shortly.
Speaking of legacy wells, though, Julie and Kaleb, staff with ECMC is prepared to look at legacy wells and how they are repurposed. Are they not?
Yes, and we also are partnering with a geothermal company to do a more formal look at what it means to repurpose legacy wells, legacy oil and gas wells to be more specific. And so I think that there's an opportunity to consider that, right? However, everybody in this room understands that legacy wells have different opportunities and challenges, and wellbore integrity is the key for everybody, right? The goal is to protect water, protect mineral formations. And so assuming those can be met, I think it does create a really interesting thing to think about how we reuse, how we recycle, like that classic 80s theory, right?
Yeah, and kind of,
recycle.
Yeah, absolutely, yeah. In addition to the wellbore integrity stuff, I think something else that's been coming out of our land group when we've talked about that too is, when we first constructed the well, right, we had working interest partners who paid for it to be an oil and gas well. Now we're repurposing it to produce power through geothermal, which is a surface right. How do we transition that well appropriately so that everyone is fairly considered in that process too?
And I'm reminded too of Colorado Mesa's program and the job opportunities that are coming along, and that's another stream of growth. So I think we're getting to our 4 minutes here for questions. Hit us. What you got?
If not, we'll keep talking.
Back there.
Hey, Wendy.
Got one back here first.
Which one
Go
here?
ahead.
Okay,
Yes, sir.
thank you. Steve Zoychak, Colorado Mesa University. And I've been scolded, some of my students have been scolded by Kent Marsh, who oversees our geo exchange system, CMU. There's a misconception between geo exchange and geothermal. You might talk a little bit about that, because you're generating steam to generate electricity versus using the ambient heat of the earth to pump through, using heat pumps. Now, heat pumps still require electricity, right? So a geo-exchange system is much different. So you might talk about the differences there. And if you were to look at it for your house, a geo-exchange system for your house, it would require a lot of capital to drill wells on your house or use the geo-exchange. So it's individual's preference on whether he's going to make that decision or not. So talk about the difference, because I've been told that it's not all geothermal. It's geo-exchange versus geothermal for generating.
Wendy, you are perfectly keyed up for this.
Right. I actually went to high school with Kent Marsh, just so you know. And he's spent the last almost 20 years developing I call it a thermal energy network for the Colorado Mesa University campus. And it's a low temperature network. And what they're able to do is, if you have like a building, for example, which has an office on one end, and then maybe a huge classroom on the other that's packed full of 100 students, and you need to cool that classroom off in the summertime, but the office doesn't need as much cooling, you can extract the heat out of that building, put it in your thermal network, which normally goes into like your borehole system, or in some cases they actually pumped some of that excess heat into their swimming pool. And so there's different ways to move it around. So the idea behind thermal energy networks is great, especially when you have multiple types of buildings, different types of uses, mixed use, so that you can shift that heat around during the day when people need it the most or they need the cooling the most. So it's also for cooling, not just heating. So hopefully that helps explain it. But it's kind of like taking a whole neighborhood of people that have geothermal heat pumps on their homes and creating a network with that, and then being able to like shift that heating and cooling around to each one's needs. And all you're doing is just either moving water, or maybe it could be like a glycol or something like that. It doesn't have to necessarily be water, but it's all self-contained. People get up in the morning, they all take their hot showers, and all of a sudden we have all this heat coming out of these homes, and where do we want to send it? That type of thing. So I'm not an HVAC or mechanical engineer, but that's what I've learned over the last few years, and how to balance these types of systems. And our site at the Good Shepherd Ranch, we're at 9,000 feet, so it doesn't really get much more hotter than maybe 85 degrees in the summertime up there. So, but we can look at how we can balance that and maybe move whatever excess heat we have coming out of the power plant, move it to some greenhouses, move it to some homes, use it to melt snow in the winter. It's going to be like a miniature Iceland, I think, when we get done with it. That's my vision. So there's definitely different ways to utilize that resource. And it's clean, and it's always there.
Michael, if I could just comment, the capital question that you had about residential and the upfront cost and everything else, I won't belabor the point about what we're doing, but when you can do this at a utility scale, and you can do it, and expanding out those costs over time like a utility does, like we do as a water utility or whatever else. So that is actually how Hayden's model is running right now. And not only were we able to lower the cost barrier for each individual homeowner, working with us individually is what we hope to do within the town as a whole, but then we can also save the electricity. So if you have a major development and there's electric upgrades, like our business park, for example. We had to do no electrical upgrades then to just running it in because of the amount of energy that's going to be saved from using thermal heat pumps. And so we're actually going to save, on average, like 7 megawatts a year in usage from major commercial. And so all of this can come together by doing that. So anyway.
Less strain on the grid.
We're going to have, so one last quick question. This gentleman right here.
Wendell Kuntz, Delta County, and I'll make it quick, Kirby. Recently, the Mount Princeton Geothermal lost a permit application. What happened there, and what's that mean for the future of industrial geothermal? Director Murphy or
Great.
whoever.
Yep. Terrific question. I think that project had a long history, and what they actually lost was their lease with the land board. They had failed to act for 20 years, and so the land board wanted to release it. I believe that lease is coming back up soon, and so I think that is an unusual circumstance, but I haven't interpreted it as anything other than like a particular set of circumstances. The folks who are still looking at Colorado are still looking at Colorado hard and are interested in participating.
That was perfect. Thank you all. How about a round of applause for our geothermal panel? That was excellent, great new information we had this year. We'll probably be talking about it again next year.